welcome to the deep dive. Pull up a chair, because today we are going to look at something that might just, fundamentally change how you think about the quiet spaces in your own life.
Yeah, and the secrets that might be, like, resting right there in your own family tree.
Exactly. And we're stepping away from our usual stuff today. No medical journals, no sociological white papers.
Yeah.
We're looking at a piece of source material that is, frankly, surprisingly potent.
Oh, absolutely. It's very different from what we normally do.
Right. We are deconstructing a script.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's a transcript for an educational audio program. It's called Bedtime Story Learning English, Episode 3,
Hmm.
and it features a 35-minute narrative titled The Last Letter.
And it is just a remarkable piece of media to unpack. I mean, when we think of language acquisition, we usually picture rote memorization,
Your
right?
sterile classroom environment.
Exactly. Incredibly utilitarian vocabulary. You know, how to ask for the train station or like how to order a coffee.
Basics.
But this script takes an entirely different, incredibly sophisticated approach.
And that is exactly what drew me to this material in the first place.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive today isn't to just recap a romantic mystery.
Oh, not at all.
We are going to analyze how a narrative that is explicitly engineered with constrained vocabulary, for beginner language learners, how it manages to navigate these massive universal themes.
It's wild. We're talking about the architecture of grief, the subjective passage of time, and the sociological impact of class division.
Yeah, and the devastating cognitive dissonance caused by a single, perfectly timed lie.
The constraint is actually the genius of the piece, I think.
Oh, so?
Well, when a writer doesn't have the luxury of hiding behind, convoluted sentence structures or highly specialized jargon, they're forced to strip the narrative down.
Like down to the studs.
Exactly, down to its absolute emotional bedrock. You are left with the rawest human drives.
So through that lens, we are going to examine the psychology behind these characters' choices,
Yeah.
right? And the environmental storytelling embedded in the physical setting.
And how the actual vocabulary lesson embedded in the story operates as this, neurobiological map to human empathy.
It's so fascinating. So to really grasp the weight of the secret at the center of this narrative, this secret that sat silently in the dark for half a century, we first had to understand the environment.
The physical space where it incubated.
Right. We have to examine the property where time essentially stopped. Let's look at the arrival of our two primary characters, Alex and Sarah, at 14 Rosewood Lane.
Okay, so the opening of the script uses environmental storytelling to do an immense amount of heavy lifting right out of the gate.
Yeah, paint the picture for us.
So Alex has just inherited this property from his aunt Rosalind, who the family just called Rose, and she has passed away after residing in this house entirely alone for 40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
Just alone.
Yeah, and when Alex and his partner Sarah arrive, the auditory and visual cues immediately establish this profound sense of isolation.
Like Sarah observes that the paint is literally peeling away. The structure is degrading.
Right. And the garden has completely surrendered to nature. The text says it is completely wild.
Yet amidst that absolute structural decay, Sarah spots the rose bushes.
Mm.
She specifically notes that even now, after decades of apparent neglect, there are rose bushes everywhere, actively fighting to grow through the overgrowth.
And if we look at the psychological mechanism at play here, the exterior of 14 Rosewood Lane is a physical manifestation of what psychologists call ambiguous loss.
Or chronic complicated grief.
Exactly. The house is locked in a state of suspended animation. She lived in isolation for 4 decades, effectively withdrawing her energy from the present and the future, really.
But the roses, which, share her name, they represent the single cognitive loop she refused to let die.
That is such a good way to put it. They are the physical anchor to a core memory that she prioritized over the maintenance of her own immediate reality.
It makes me think of the house less as a home and more as like an architectural quarantine zone.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's as if she viewed the outside world as a contagion, She locked the heavy wooden doors in the mid-70s, letting the exterior just slowly surrender to the elements.
Not because she was lazy.
Right, not at all. But because she was fiercely, exclusively protecting the artifact hidden inside. The building didn't matter. The containment did.
A quarantine zone is a highly accurate way to frame it. And we see the human reaction to stepping into a space like that through the contrasting dynamics of Alex and Sarah.
They are so different in how they approach this.
Totally. Alex approaches this space with a highly pragmatic, almost detached lens. He mentions he only met Aunt Rose once when he was a toddler.
He doesn't even retain a visual memory of her face.
Exactly. It's only olfactory. He just remembers the scent of rose perfume.
So to him, this house is just a legal transfer of assets. It's a logistical puzzle to solve.
But Sarah, on the other hand, she operates as the intuitive engine of this whole investigation.
She's not looking at the real estate at all.
No, she is reading the emotional residue of the space. Like, when they unlock the front door, she immediately zeroes in on a photograph on the wall.
Yeah, it's a picture of a radiant, laughing young woman. The back reads, Rose, Summer, 1974.
And Alex looks at it and just sees a stranger. But Sarah looks at the micro expressions. She points out the look in her eyes and states definitively that the woman in the photo is deeply in love.
Sarah has this high degree of narrative intuition.
She really does. She understands that we don't just inherit physical deeds to properties, we inherit the unresolved psychological baggage of our ancestors.
The silences, the locked doors, the energy of a life lived in retreat. Think about the spaces left behind by your own older relatives. What single object or scent defines your memory of someone?
Like Alex with the rose perfume, it's so visceral.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that transition from the chaotic, overgrown exterior into the deeply private inner sanctum of the house, it highlights a fascinating contradiction.
Oh, the bedroom.
Yes. They move through the dusty hallways, they open the door to Rose's bedroom, and the environment drastically shifts. Alex notes that everything is impeccably neat.
The books are perfectly organized, the dresses are carefully hung.
It's so jarring compared to the wild garden.
Right, and this is a textbook example of compensatory control theory in action.
I'll break that down for us.
So, when human beings experience a catastrophic loss of agency in a major area of their lives, like an unexplainable romantic trauma, the resulting anxiety is huge.
Right, it's overwhelming.
And it's often mitigated by exerting hyper-control over their immediate microenvironment.
So Rose was entirely powerless to change the macro trajectory of her life.
Exactly. So she compensated by micromanaging her dresses and her books. She constructed this. No, it's a symptom of a highly managed distress.
And it's within that oasis of control that Sarah's intuition pushes the narrative forward again. She tells Alex this anecdote about finding a hidden tin box of secrets under the floorboards of her own grandmother's house.
She posits this fundamental theory of human nature. She says, everyone has secrets, even the people we love most.
Which is such a chilling true thought. And that prompts Alex to open a neatly organized drawer where he finds exactly 12 letters.
Tied tightly together with a red ribbon.
The physical presentation of those letters is so crucial to me.
How so?
Well, we exist in this paradigm of digital ephemera now. Trillions of text messages are sent and deleted every year. Communication is ambient and weightless.
That's true. It's invisible.
But these are 12 tangible physical objects. The red ribbon implies curation. They weren't just shoved into a box, they were deliberately bound together.
They represent the entirety of a romantic connection condensed into a holdable artifact.
And finding them triggers a fantastic ethical friction between Alex and Sarah.
Oh, the debate over opening them.
Yes. Sarah urges him to untie the ribbon and read them. But Alex immediately recoils. His instinct is boundary preservation. He states clearly that the letters are private.
But Sarah counters with a pretty compelling argument.
She does. She points out that Rose is gone, she left everything to Alex, and perhaps leaving these letters in an easily-accessible drawer, rather than burning them, was a deliberate choice.
Right. And I'm curious to explore this tension. At what point does a deceased person's private correspondence transition into an active piece of family history that, demands to be read?
Was Sarah right to pressure him?
Archival ethicists debate this constantly, actually. The core question is whether the right to privacy extends into perpetuity after death.
Right. Does death erase privacy?
Alex views the letters through the lens of interpersonal boundary respect, but Sarah views them through the lens of narrative closure. By legally transferring the physical state to Alex, Rose essentially transferred the stewardship of her legacy.
Sarah's theory is that a secret carefully preserved but left behind is essentially a subconscious plea for witness.
Exactly. If Rose wanted the secret destroyed, she had 40 years to strike the match. By binding them in a ribbon and placing them next to her jewelry, she categorized them as valuables to be found.
She preserved the data.
And the data they uncover in the very first letter is steeped in immediate tension.
Yeah, unfolding the old paper, Alex reads a letter from a man named Daniel. And it's written from a train station. It's frantic.
Daniel writes that his hands are shaking, he doesn't want to leave, but his father is critically ill and he must take over the family business. He explicitly begs Rose to wait for him.
It establishes a classic conflict of duty versus desire. But what really elevates the tension is the chronological limitation of the artifact.
The dates.
Yeah, Alex checks the dates. The 12 letters span a single year, 1974 to 1975, and then just an absolute void.
And Sarah deduces instantly that Rose spent the ensuing 40 years in that house, tending those roses, waiting for a resolution to a narrative that abruptly stopped in 1975.
12 letters over a year implies a steady, rhythmic cadence of communication. It implies a deep trust. So the underlying mystery isn't simply why the rhythm faded. The mystery is what kind of catastrophic event could derail that trust so violently that a woman would sentence herself to half a century of isolation.
And we find the answer at the very bottom of the drawer, in a letter that breaks the established pattern entirely.
Right at the end of the timeline, they find Daniel's final letter, dated December 1975. The text is exuberant, right?
Oh, he's thrilled.
Yeah.
He announces that his father has recovered, his brother is taking over the business, and he is finally coming home.
He explicitly states he will be at Rose's door on Christmas Eve.
It is, structurally, the promise of a perfect resolution.
But we are experiencing a profound layer of dramatic irony here. Because we, along with Alex and Sarah, know that the Christmas Eve reunion either didn't happen or it failed spectacularly.
Because we know the end of Rose's story. She died alone.
Exactly. The tension comes from discovering the mechanism of that failure. And that mechanism is revealed in an envelope addressed to Daniel, but lacking a stamp.
It is Rose's unsent reply.
The unsent letter is the key that unlocks the entire psychological architecture of the story.
In it, Rose documents that a man arrived at her door claiming to be Daniel's friend, and he delivered the news that Daniel had married someone else.
And he didn't just say it. He provided physical evidence. A wedding photograph featuring Daniel, dated December 12, 1975.
A mere 12 days before Daniel was supposedly arriving at her door.
The cognitive whiplash of that moment for Rose must have been just staggering. I mean, she receives a letter full of joyous promises and almost simultaneously physical photographic proof of absolute betrayal.
It's unbearable. And in her unsent letter, she writes, "I did not cry in front of him, but I cried all night. I don't understand. How can both things be true?"
And then she makes a decision that dictates the next 50 years of her life. She writes, "I don't know what to believe, so I will believe what my heart tells me, that you loved me once, and that was real, even if it did not last."
We are looking at a masterclass in how the human brain processes cognitive dissonance here.
Yeah, unpack that for us.
Well, when presented with two entirely contradictory realities, Daniel's loving words versus the visual proof of his marriage, the psychological friction is just unbearable.
The brain literally can't hold both facts.
Right. The brain demands a resolution to alleviate the stress, and Rose resolves it by choosing a third path: narrative foreclosure.
Narrative foreclosure.
She decides to lock the purity of their 1974 love in a mental vault and shut down all further inquiry. She chooses the safety of pristine memory over the agonizing vulnerability of seeking the truth.
I have to say, I found myself genuinely frustrated by her passivity when analyzing this moment. Yeah, from a modern, perhaps overly pragmatic perspective, the obvious move is confrontation. If Daniel is literally scheduled to arrive on your porch on Christmas Eve, you wait on the porch, you hold up the photograph, and you scream at him.
You demand an explanation.
Yes, why not show him the photo? Well, I just politely shut down. Retreating into absolute silence feels like a surrender to me.
It does feel like a surrender from a modern viewpoint, sure, where communication is instant and confrontation is often public.
Right.
But we have to contextualize this within the sociological framework of the mid-70s, coupled with the profound, paralyzing nature of shame.
Shame is a powerful motivator.
Exactly. The man at the door didn't just break her heart, he humiliated her. He presented her with photographic evidence that she was a fool. She explicitly notes, "I did not cry in front of him." That is the language of someone desperately clinging to their dignity. To confront Daniel on Christmas Eve would require opening herself up to further gaslighting or humiliation. By shutting the door, she takes control of the narrative's ending, even if that ending is a tragedy.
It is the ultimate avoidant defense mechanism. It's essentially the analog version of, typing out a massive, emotionally devastating text message to someone who deeply betrayed you.
Staring at it on the screen.
Yeah, staring at it and then just putting your phone on airplane mode forever. You sever your connection to the network entirely so no new data can hurt you.
That analogy perfectly captures the protective isolation she engineered. She disconnected the network.
But the stakes here aren't just an awkward conversation. The cost of that airplane mode for Rose was a 50-year solitary confinement.
And while Rose accepted that disconnected reality, Sarah, operating in the present day, she refuses to.
Sarah analyzes the data and concludes that the photograph was a forgery, a deliberate act of sabotage.
And the moment Sarah realizes the lie, the genre of the story fundamentally shifts.
It really does. We pivot from an archaeological excavation of passive grief into an active, real-time investigation. Sarah turns detective.
She utilizes the clues within the letters. A family business, a shop on a main street, a birth year around 1950.
And Alex connects this to a childhood memory of his grandmother mentioning an old bookshop run by the Morgan family.
And this is where the timeline of the story creates this brilliant friction. For 50 years, the truth was buried under analog constraints.
The inability to easily verify information in 1975 allowed the lie to solidify into reality.
But in the present day, Sarah utilizes modern laptops and search engines. Within minutes, she locates Daniel Morgan.
He's 72 years old.
And he lives a mere 30-minute drive away.
There is such a profound tragic irony to that geographic proximity. They were separated by a 30-minute drive for half a century.
But before they act on this information, Sarah pumps the brakes, initiating another layer of ethical debate in the car.
She questions the morality of disruption. She asks Alex, what if he moved on? What if he has a family?
She is asking if they have the right to detonate a 50-year-old truth bomb in an old man's living room.
Put yourself in that car ride for a second. If you found out a stranger had been living under a false assumption for half a century, would you knock on their door to disrupt their peace with the truth?
It's the ethics of narrative disruption. Daniel has spent decades constructing a life built on a specific understanding of his past.
Sarah is warning that delivering this truth doesn't magically rewind the clock. It destroys the foundation of his current reality.
It forces a complete psychological recalculation of his entire adult life.
But Alex argues from a standpoint of ultimate justice. He points out that Daniel spent 50 years not knowing why the woman he loved turned him away.
He believes that Daniel is owed the reality of Ruse's devotion. Alex says, don't you think he deserves to know the truth?
Alex realizes that the core truth they are delivering isn't just the revelation of the brother's lie. The transcendent truth is the validation of Daniel's worth.
Right. Alex wants to hand Daniel the knowledge that his love wasn't unrequited. Rose loved him, always, until the end.
So the car pulls up to a neat house full of flowers. The tension is palpable. Alex knocks on the door, and what happens next hinges on a deeply biological, incredibly poetic mechanism of human memory.
The door opens, revealing a 72-year-old man. Alex hasn't even begun to formulate an explanation for his presence.
But Daniel looks at Alex's face, processes the visual data, and his demeanor instantly shifts.
He says, softly, you have her eyes.
It's such an overwhelming moment. Sarah is stunned that he could recognize Alex purely through a facial feature. And Daniel responds, I never forgot her eyes. Not for one day.
From a neurobiological standpoint, this speaks to how the brain encodes deeply emotional visual stimuli.
Like the fusiform face area.
Exactly. The fusiform face area of the brain processes facial recognition, but when a face is tied to intense emotional salience, like profound romantic love, the amygdala signals the hippocampus to encode that specific visual data permanently. Despite 50 years of aging, despite looking at a completely different person, the specific geometric and chromatic pattern of Rose's eyes triggers an immediate visceral recall in Daniel.
The memory didn't degrade at all. It was simply waiting for the right stimulus.
And once inside, Daniel fills in the missing piece of the December 1975 timeline. He confirms he did, in fact, go to Rose's door on Christmas Eve.
He stood right on her porch. She opened the door, looked at him and said, please go. I know the truth now. And then she shut the door.
Daniel was left standing there with zero context, entirely bewildered. He reveals to Alex and Sarah that he never married. He remained faithful to the promise he made in his letters.
Which forces Alex and Sarah to reveal the unsent letter, the fake photographs, and the lie told by the man claiming to be his friend.
And Daniel instantly identifies the architect of this tragedy. He says, my brother?
He explains the motive with chilling simplicity. He never liked Rose. He thought she was not good enough for our family.
We have to pause and dissect the sheer destructive power of that motive. Not good enough. This isn't a crime of passion. It's a crime of sociological preservation.
The brother operated from a place of entrenched classism.
And endogamy. The belief that one must marry within their own social strata. He viewed Rose as a social liability.
So to protect the family's perceived status, He engineered a psychological assassination.
His arrogance effectively stole a century of cumulative human happiness, 50 years from his brother and 50 years from Rose.
The injustice of it is staggering. I mean, if I were Daniel in that moment, learning that my own brother had stolen my life's happiness over pure snobbery, the rage would be blinding.
But Daniel's reaction defies that expectation completely. There is no explosion of anger. There is no demand for vengeance against his brother.
Sarah gently informs him that Rose kept his letters, and she kept the garden of roses he planted for her. And Daniel, weeping, fixates entirely on that detail.
Mm.
He asks, "She kept the roses."
This is a profound demonstration of what psychologists call emotional maturity, or in the language of the script, grace. Daniel is presented with an agonizing injustice, but his cognitive flexibility allows him to bypass the anger directed at his brother and immediately center the validation of Rose's love.
He shifts his focus from the tragedy of what was stolen to the profound beauty of what survived.
He reveals he planted those roses in the summer of 1974, telling her, "Every time you see them bloom, remember that I love you."
It's like Daniel essentially lit a signal fire in the garden in 1974. He thought the fire went out in 1975. And now, at 72, he finds out she spent her entire life tending to the flame.
The fire never died.
And that leads to the quiet, breathtaking resolution of the narrative. Daniel doesn't ask for revenge. He simply asks if he can visit the house. He just wants to see the roses.
And Alex, recognizing the moral weight of the situation, tells him the house is his.
It's a devastatingly beautiful ending. But this is where we have to pivot our analytical lens, because this beautifully devastating resolution wasn't just written to make us cry.
No, it was engineered to instruct.
Right. We need to examine the pedagogy of this narrative. Why a story of complex grief and classist betrayal is being used to teach beginner English. Let's look at the actual vocabulary this story was designed to impart.
The outro of the source material explicitly reveals this educational framework. The narrator returns, accompanied by soft piano music, and frames the thematic resolution.
The mystery was solved not with anger, not with blame, but with truth, told gently and received with grace.
And then the narrator provides a key vocabulary list.
The structural question is so fascinating here. If you were designing a curriculum for a beginner language learner, why build it around a 50-year cold case romance?
Yeah.
Why not utilize standard, highly functional scenarios like navigating an airport or purchasing groceries?
It comes down to the neurobiology of learning. Educational psychologists understand that emotion is the ultimate cognitive highlighter.
The amygdala, right?
Yes. The amygdala, which processes emotional responses, sits adjacent to the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory consolidation. When you read a sterile textbook, the amygdala remains dormant. The information is processed, but it isn't tagged as vital.
But when you introduce a narrative that triggers empathy, sadness, or a sense of injustice,
the amygdala activates. It releases neurotransmitters that essentially tell the hippocampus this data is incredibly important. Wire it deeply.
it's heavy in learning and action. Neurons that fire together, wire together.
Exactly. So by anchoring the vocabulary words to the emotional peaks of the story, the curriculum ensures the language sticks.
Let's walk through the specific vocabulary words and how they map perfectly onto the narrative arc, because the words themselves are the true stars of the narrative. The first set includes passed away, wild, and ribbon.
These words establish the initial environmental and psychological conflict. Passed away forces the learner to engage with the concept of mortality and the ensuing inheritance of consequence.
And wild is used to describe the unkempt garden. But linguistically, it represents the chaotic, untamed passage of time when left to its own devices.
Conversely, ribbon, specifically the red ribbon tightly binding the letters, represents the exact opposite. It is the human attempt at preservation, constraint, and order.
So the tension between the wild decay of the house and the tight ribbon in the drawer is the central thematic conflict of Rose's life.
Building on that, the text moves to the words that drive the plot. Recovered and misunderstanding.
Daniel's father recovered, which should have been the catalyst for their reunion, but that joyous event violently collided with the misunderstanding.
And framing the brother's malicious lie as a misunderstanding is an interesting linguistic choice by the narrator.
Yeah, it softens the malice, focusing instead on the cognitive gap it created between Rose and Daniel.
The entire 50-year tragedy is suspended on that single multisyllabic noun. You will never forget the definition of misunderstanding after feeling the crushing weight of the isolation it caused in this story.
Finally, we reach the words of resolution. Bloom, grace, deserves, and recognize.
Bloom is the physical manifestation of resilience. The roses blooming despite the neglect mirrors the love persisting despite the lie.
And recognize operates on two levels, right? The literal visual recognition of Alex's eyes and the deeper emotional recognition of the truth.
Alex decides Daniel deserves that truth. And grace, perhaps the most complex concept for a beginner to grasp, is perfectly demonstrated by Daniel's reaction.
Grace isn't just politeness. It is the active, difficult choice to accept a painful truth with dignity rather than destructive anger.
It is brilliant instructional design. The vocabulary list isn't arbitrary. It is the emotional blueprint of the human experience they just witnessed.
And the narrator concludes the audio program with a masterstroke of psychological safety. The narrator directly addresses the learner, saying, "You listen so beautifully tonight. Your English grows stronger with every story you hear. You are safe. You are loved."
That framing is vital. The curriculum purposefully exposes the learner to profound concepts of betrayal, systemic classism, and chronic grief.
It asks the learner to carry a heavy emotional load to cement the vocabulary.
By ending with those grounding affirmations, you are safe, you are loved,
The narrator acts as a psychological tether, bringing the learner back from the intense empathy of the story into the security of their immediate reality.
it ensures the emotional arousal aids learning without causing residual distress.
As we look back at the scope of this deep dive, it's incredible how much ground we've covered originating from such a constrained text. We analyzed the architectural psychology of a dusty, peeling house on Rosewood Lane.
We unpacked the compensatory control of a perfectly organized bedroom and the tactical weight of 12 analog letters.
We dissected the paralyzing cognitive dissonance caused by a forged photograph and the sociological cruelty of a brother obsessed with class status.
And finally, we witnessed the neurobiological power of an old man recognizing the eyes of his lost love, responding to a stolen life with profound vocabulary-defining grace.
It serves as a compelling reminder of the danger of unverified assumptions, the destructive ripple effects of pride, and the enduring resilience of a love maintained by a single stubborn garden.
At the very end of the source material, the narrator poses a closing question to the listener. Have you ever lost someone because of a misunderstanding?
It's a prompt that forces the fiction into reality. It demands that you apply the mechanics of this story to your own interpersonal history.
It requires the listener to audit their own life for similar, perhaps smaller scale, narrative foreclosures. Where have we shut the door rather than asking the difficult question?
And building on that audit, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. We spent a lot of time discussing Rose's unsent letter, the piece of paper he sealed away to protect herself from further pain, which ultimately sealed her fate. I want you to consider the unsent letters currently residing in your own life. I'm talking about the messages languishing in your drafts folder, the emails you meticulously typed out in a moment of acute hurt, only to delete them before hitting send.
The vital questions you have been too proud, too anxious, or too fearful to ask out loud.
What would happen if, today, you decided to finally override that airplane mode? What would happen if you chose the vulnerability of confrontation over the safety of silence? Think about the doors you could knock on right now to demand the truth, instead of waiting half a century for someone else to discover your unsaid words hidden in a dusty drawer.
The prospect of asking is terrifying, but as the silence of 14 Rosewood Lane demonstrates, the alternative is a lifetime spent tending to ghosts.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives around you, and until next time, keep exploring the stories hidden all around you.